vulnerable? Is it because I want to try to find a way to re-own myself, or is it because I want somebody to do something for me? And I think we end up we're in a place now where most of our relationships are either trades or objectifying the other person. In other words, what will you do for me, rather than who are you? And so the challenge of the small groups really is giving you a chance to practice some of that. I think ultimately most people stay away from support groups for that very reason, because they think that they're going there for the group to do something for them, rather than they're going there to figure out how to reclaim their own hearts. And that's the biggest challenge in any situation that we're in. So you're right. I think in that sense, absolutely, I would say, well, yeah, I think each of you have had enough experiences here at CCU to say, nah, thanks, but no thanks. I'll opt out. And I get that. At the same time, that's exactly why, actually, I asked the counseling center to get involved, because they bring absolute confidentiality with them that I may not be able to necessarily offer. I do anyway, but what's the law? So yeah, I think there's part of that. Any other reactions or anything? Yeah.
I think I realized later in the day that I'm actually more thankful for the group session, because as people are like, how was your Thursday, Tuesday classes and everything, trying to explain the expectations or what this class will entail right in the first day.
Right.
I'm having a hard time explaining it. So the opportunity to process from people who have heard the same lectures and read the same material, instead of having to teach the person how to process it.
Yeah.
Oh, you record these lectures. Will you watch it so I can process it?
Yeah, right.
I'm not really going to do that. So the opportunity to work through it with people who have heard the same information or who are also processing and walking down the same road.
Yeah. And that is the benefit. Yeah. I mean, in a sense that y'all have heard something similar, and it always comes out differently than when it's locked up in here. And it allows you to kind of integrate that information, because you have to articulate it to somebody else, or hear somebody else articulate it, because you haven't. This is not a conversation we normally have. But yeah, you're right. The one note, I'm still working on this, but the one note right now, the way the groups are setting up, is that each of you will probably be doing a group once every 4 weeks rather than every week, because I can't find any place to put us. I have seven full groups between the two sections, and there's no space at the time that the class occurs. And so so it will be in this classroom. Your group time will be in this classroom, but it will probably be rotating every fourth for each of you because of the size of the class. But it's not ideal. I'd rather have it every week, but this side of heaven, I guess I got to live with it. Anything else? Any other reactions or questions or anything that came up? Yeah.
I think like you mentioned, ownership. I think that's kind of what I was thinking about after last class is, and just the question of what is the relationship between ownership of yourself and vulnerability. And because I think it's easy for me to walk into small groups like that. And I've noticed myself do this in the past. It's like I have a fragmented identity, and I walk into these groups and hand pieces of my identity to every single person in the group.
Yep.
And ask that everyone piece my identity back together for me.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think it's going to be a challenge to not do that. And it's just challenging to own yourself in that. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
More to that.
Yeah. Any of you guys Harry Potter geeks? Anybody? Or are you willing to admit it? My daughter on her honeymoon is at Orlando, and she spent 2 days in Harry Potter World. That's my daughter. I don't know why, but it came from her mother, not from me. But I many years ago, the insistence of my kids, I read the books, and there is actually a really profound metaphor that J.K. Rowling kind of happened onto. And it was the idea of the Horcruxes. You guys know what that means? And basically, the evil antagonist basically took pieces of himself and hid them, because if they all came together, he would be the what? Most vulnerable. That's a really powerful metaphor. That's exactly what we tend to do, is we give pieces of ourselves to a variety of people, but we keep them separate, because if they all came together, all hell would break loose. And I see that in counseling all the time, is that a lot of times people will come into counseling and they'll bring all of the pieces together, but then they go out and they spread them everywhere else, because they don't want anybody to have all the information about them. I mean, the most extreme example of that is DID. Literally. So, but we do that on a regular basis. We have different personas, whatever aspects of your personality, whatever you want to call it, that we do, and we spread it out to everybody, because we're not so sure that we can entrust all of ourselves to one person. Which also means that we've got a lot to talk about when we start talking about the stained glass self, because it fits all together in that sense. So, any other reactions or questions or anything? Well, thankfully, I've worked enough in antagonistic environments toward Max that I always have backup plans. So, I want to do a little exercise with you guys. It ended up being very, very fascinating yesterday afternoon with the first class. They were the ones that jumped into this pool first. And it's just, we're going to do a poll. You guys have been in my classes, some of you that I've done this polling before. We'll do something like this just to see what happens. So let me pray, and then we'll jump into some of our polls. Father, guide and direct our time, as short as it is, and just the rest of the semester to walk into a fuller and fuller understanding of your heart for us to be free. That's why you sent Jesus, so that we could actually be free to choose you, to choose our relationships with each other, and to live at peace with ourselves. And grace is that avenue to do that. We like to talk a lot about it, but we really don't tend to live it very much. So I pray that you will guide us into a fuller understanding of that, and just keep our hearts open to listening to your Holy Spirit that wants to poke at us and say, look here. And give us the courage to be able to look at that place. So guide us today in this exercise, and help us to understand more fully just where each other are, but also just where we are as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, this is what the deal is. You're going to need your phones. If you got your computers, you can use those. You're going to be texting, the number you're going to be texting to is 37607. And in the text box, you're going to put my name, Dr. Mitch. Lowercase is fine. You should get some kind of confirmation of being in the poll. So 37607, Dr. Mitch. Don't forget the S. No, just all one. Yep, all lowercase, all one. Sooner or later, my name will be either spoken in disgust or spoken in reverence. Okay. So this is what I want to do, all right? As you saw in the syllabus, this is the one time the syllabus is correct, is the title of what I want to talk about today is Why Am I Never Enough? Why am I never enough? And the challenge of that question is the phrases within it. Every time I start a class, you guys probably know what I am about to say. Whatever you do, define your terms. And whenever we look at a question like that, we have to ask, what are the key terms in there? And there's one very significant one, because that question is the one that we utter all the time when we don't measure up. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to fill in a sentence. There it is. Please complete this sentence. Never blank enough. To give you an example, I'm never tall enough. Don't put that, because that's stupid. No shame in that, right?
How many can you say?
Yeah, as many as you can keep going. We've got a limit of 50. I don't know, we're under 50 in the class, so at least everybody can do one if they want. Sooner or later, we'll get to the end. There it is. We're full. The bigger it is, the more frequently it gets used. I think we probably could all have predicted what the biggest one would be. Never good enough. The question is, what is good? What is good? You can add in probably all of these other things under that one word. We use some interesting words to be vague, really, in a lot of ways, about what we're really saying, because we really don't drill down on that one. I think everybody on the face of the planet has probably said, I'm never good enough. The question is, who's the measurer of that? But you look at more of these: fast, brave, beautiful, skinny, spiritual, smart. That would be expected in a place like this. Yeah, make sure he takes his meds in the morning. I would suspect that if we were to poll all the world changers coming in today that crashed our little party with tables and chairs, they'd say the same thing. So what do we end up having? We end up having people that come into a culture like this and fitting in just fine. Just fine. The worst part about our culture today is that they think that the opposite is the solution. And in the Christian culture, that's true too. We think that if I'm never good enough, then I must be bad. If I'm never skinny enough, I must be... We think in very dichotomous terms. That's the problem with a lot of this conversation that we're going to be having around these terms. Is we think in very dichotomous, categorical terms, and if it isn't one, it can only be the other. And that's where the problem comes in when we're looking at this. Now, let's try another one. I don't know if this will work, but we'll give it a shot. I've done this in the transformational psych class. I want to talk about terms, okay? The next one is this. Figured it wouldn't. The next one is this. What do you think of when you hear the word grace? Okay, now, your turn. Anything surprise you about what you see up here? Anything catch your attention? Yeah, Kaylin?
Unattainable.
Unattainable. Okay. What else? What other words catch your attention? Yeah. Inauthenticity. Mm-hmm. Okay. Other words that surprise you?
Hook.
Hook. Yeah. Hook. Anything else? Yeah. Feminine. Yeah. You got to begin to wonder. See, these terms are rolling around in your heads. Some people are seeing grace as weakness. Some people are seeing it as feminine versus masculine. Is it unmasculine to be gracious? I don't know. Undeserving, yes. Inauthenticity. Inauthenticity. Let's do the next one and make a comparison. When you hear the word shame, what do you think of? Now, do it again. What surprises you? What catches your attention and why?
I'd say sex, because originally that wasn't supposed to be created to be a shameful thing.
Yeah, for sure. What else? Yeah. Exposed. Mm-hmm. Any other surprises in here? Yeah. Fear, for sure. Yeah, Keith. Say again.
Motivating. It's sideways.
Oh, motivating. Gotcha. Sorry about that. Motivating. That's a key. That is a key to what we need to talk about. Because that is where we are, right? We honestly believe that shame is far more effective at changing behavior than grace is. Far more effective. Which, when you think about it in terms of our Christian life, where does that take us? We trade one for another. There was another word that was consistent in last night's section, the other section, and this section. It was unattainable. And if grace is unattainable, all right, forget about all the theological understandings and all of that stuff. If it's unattainable, what is my only possibility of trying to get it? How do I do that? Perfection. There's the possibility, yeah. Working harder. I mean, if it's unattainable, we can say, okay, forget it. I can't do it. I'll settle for this. Or I'll build a ladder. And I'll build a ladder so that I can keep stepping on each rung, and each time I get there, I'll get a little closer to grace. Check your theology. Because what you say is not what you do is not what you say you believe. The other thing that catches my attention, and you guys don't know this, but you did just exactly what the other section did, and it was this. Identity. You got to ask yourself the question, when the word grace comes up, why doesn't identity come up? Because when I do something bad, I assume I am, and fill in the blank. bad. It's funny the leaps we make around this and how it looks. Shame is a prison that we have the key to get out, but we refuse to get out because we think it's the only way we can pay for that grace that we've been given. But we're not works-oriented at all, right? We're not Pharisees at all. Kaylin.
I'm just kind of curious. We're like, so often we're supposed to take responsibility
Right.
for our wrongdoings.
Right.
But then I'm confused because I feel like it is an identity to own your shame and own your bad parts. But then to own good parts is prideful, and you're supposed to say, that's not me, that's all God's good work, or that's all grace. But,
Yeah.
You know, we're so like ingrained to accept identity as bad, but then to say like whatever is good in me is outside of me, it's not me.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's a terrible double bind, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why we've got so much. Somebody put, I don't know if it was here last night or I think it was this one. Somebody put anxiety. Anxiety is the solution to double binds. That's what we feel. So yeah, you're right. I mean, think about it in these terms. You know, Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as." How many of us actually do that? The world would be a pretty crummy place, really. If we loved people the way we love ourselves. Now, Jesus said that. I think I'm on safe ground, hopefully. But yet, it's prideful. It's prideful to love me, love what God has created, love what God has fashioned, love the things that God has brought into my life to bring about what I am. You know, one of the most difficult paragraphs I read in my daughter's wedding, in the homily I did, was when I started talking about redemption. Because we want to settle for change, we're not willing to engage in redemption. Because redemption takes time. And by the time it's over, it's unrecognizable. I mean, it's a remarkable point in time when we get glimpses of what redemption can look like. and my daughter's wedding day was that day for me. Because I looked right over her shoulder, and there was her 12-year-old daughter that she had out of wedlock in the audience watching her mom get married. And I fell apart. Completely fell apart. And I refused to apologize if everybody was uncomfortable. Tough. Because that was redemptive. I wasn't stupid enough, thank God. I wasn't stupid enough to say to my daughter, oh, this will turn out great. This will be a redemptive moment. If I did, I would not blame her for committing homicide. I really wouldn't. Because all I could do is sit at her bedside while she was weeping about the daughter she could have had. And those things still live in our memory. But that one moment brought me all together. It brought me all together. That moment in time, my wife asked me after the ceremony and everything, how you doing? I said, beats the heck out of me. I have no idea. Because there are so many things. And the day after, we were both kind of still in a fog. She said, okay, how about now? Because I'd had some time to journal a little bit. And I realized that one moment in time, I was all there. I was all there. I'm one of the things that you guys have seen in being in my classes is, I'm uncomfortably vulnerable oftentimes. Why do I do that? Not because of you. I like you all. You're really wonderful people. But it's for me to reclaim my own heart. That's why I do that. It's also an invitation. for you to see that vulnerability will not kill you. So, whoops. Well, there it went. So, now I get to switch gears. Yeah, Mason.
So I'm curious, like, if we did this same thing with the question, like, what does it mean to love yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, what is the reaction when people hear, like, loving yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What that would be. Because it's like, I feel like that idea is so muddled
Yeah. Yeah.
in itself, too. Because it's like,
Yeah.
to love yourself is to be feminine, to act this way.
To be prideful. I mean, like what Caitlin said. Yeah. And inevitably, loving ourselves it's gotten drilled into all of us that something's wrong with that. The thing is grace is the key. So what does it end up kind of actually looking like? Is acceptance. So, is this actually going to work? No, I didn't think it would. So, I was captured by this quote. Whether true or not, that thought of not enough occurs to us automatically before we can even think or question it or examine it. We spend most of the hours and days of our lives hearing, explaining, complaining, or worrying about what we don't have enough of. The question is, in terms of our relationships, what's the source? What's the resource or source that we see as measuring the enoughness, if you will? Because the issue that we're talking about, and Brene Brown mentions it as well, is the idea of scarcity. We live in a culture of scarcity. John Paul Getty, who was a billionaire, made his money in the oil business in the early days of American oil. Somebody once asked him, how much is enough? And he said, just a little more. And that's oftentimes the same case. The one thing that Brene Brown doesn't talk about is the thing that Jesus talked about when he said, I came so that you might have life and have it abundantly. Abundantly. So it's scarcity versus abundance. And how do I live life abundantly is oftentimes, I think, we have some very strange notions about that, which usually means pain-free, difficulty-free, all of those sorts of things that are very much a part of that. So when we ask this question, when will I ever be enough? We're talking about scarcity. The question is compared to what? And the list goes on. Others, thank you, social media. I take somebody's highlight reel and compare it to the dark places in my soul. Or my ideal self. The ideal self, interestingly enough, is always changing. It is what I've got down here, it's a floating standard that always rises. My ideal self I'll never hit. Everybody knows that. You ask any perfectionist, can you be perfect? And they'll say, no, but I'm going to die trying. So we split ourselves. Here we go again. We split ourselves and say, I know I can't be perfect, but it's only going to be better if I try. So it's myself, my past. A lot of times people idealize their past and then compare the present to what they had. What is so difficult in any relationship that breaks apart and then a new one comes along and you're making comparisons about what it used to be. Unfortunately, our eyesight gets really fuzzy about past things. It's funny, we spend a lot of our time thinking about negative things while it's happening, and then when it's over, we're idealizing everything that it was before. Yeah, Shelby?
With the idea of the past and everything, do you feel like God calls us to do anything to forget our past once we've dealt with it and ask for forgiveness for it? Or what is that supposed to feel like?
Yeah, and I think the reality is we can't forget our past. I don't think we were designed to forget our past. Really. I mean, when you look at human memory, the basis of learning is memory. So it's not a matter of forgetting my past. It is a matter of leveraging my past to change my behavior in the present and the future. So the people that want to say, I just want to forget what happened, I mean, in a lot of cases, I usually don't say it. I sometimes will have a filter. And I'll just think to myself, good luck. Because if I'm going to deny what's happened to me, it will forever affect me thereafter. I have mentioned this in one of the other classes. The story of Love's Canal. Some of you guys probably remember this story. In Love's Canal, it was a little community outside of Niagara Falls. They saw the population in Niagara Falls growing at such a rate that they were beginning to kind of convert land to do developments and so forth. And about 50 to 65 years before, at one particular place, literally, Love's Canal was a canal. They were trying to connect Niagara Falls at the base to another part of the state to move commerce and so forth. And it never happened. They ran out of money and they left it empty. And so they had concrete walls on this canal and said, oh, we've got all this toxic waste. Maybe we should just bury it there. Good idea. 50-gallon drums all get put in. Dirt gets put over it. 50 to 65 years later, everybody forgets that it's there. And they build a community over it called Love's Canal. A few years later, New York Department of Health finds out and begins to see the spike in health issues just around a 10-mile radius around Love's Canal. Birth deformities, cancer, leukemia, all sorts of, faucets coming on fire, all sorts of fun little fireworks. And they say, what the heck's going on here? And they take a soil sample, and lo and behold, what they find is it's severely contaminated. So they say, what happened? I don't know. Somebody lost the title. Who knows? So they dig down and they find these barrels. And what has happened to the barrels? They've cracked open. They have leaked into the water table. And they've contaminated everybody in the surrounding area. Why do I give you that metaphor? That's what buried emotions are like. We bury these emotions and we put them someplace so deep and we're sure that it's not going to affect anything. But it leaks into our emotional water table and shows up in our relationships. Like trust issues. Or like stereotypes that I carry about one gender over another. Or whatever, you name it. It seeps in, or anger management issues, or anxiety, or other things like that. It's a contributor. It's not a sole thing. It's not the only thing. But let's be clear. A lot of times when we say, it'll be fine, just bury it. And a lot of times Christians will use that phrase, I'm just forgetting my past. That's what Paul said, right? I'm not sure that's what he had in mind. Yeah.
I just had a question about the ideal self. You said it's like an evolving standard. And how can we live in the balance of the there but not yet kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
But we keep counting on this side of eternity.
Right.
And for people who are perfectionists,
Mm-hmm.
you do want to continue to grow and be like your best self.
Right.
I think that is biblical. But at the same time, you live with this standard of I am never going to be that. So how do you... Maybe.
If it's your best self versus your ideal self, that's something very different. See, again, it's that dichotomy, is that if I don't strive for that, I'm settling for mediocrity. I'm just going to, quit. Homework gets done when it gets done. Whatever. That's I'm living in grace. No, you're not. You're being lazy. So, being my best self, using that phrase, being my best self, it doesn't mean that I don't set targets and then move toward those targets. But how am I going to get there? Am I going to tyrannize myself with how bad I am, hoping that I'll hit that best self? Or am I going to live with my humanity? Live with my limits? Because it's very different being the best you can be versus being the best. That's very different. Because being the best I can be is taking into account this nasty little thing called reality. So, what's the source? The source is it's shame and this idea of comparisons and everything else. It thrives in shame-prone cultures. Again, Brene Brown talks about culture in the external sense. I'm challenging you to think of what is the internal culture of your heart. Because there's an internal culture too. What somebody put up motivating. What motivates me to reach out to somebody or look a particular way or say a particular thing? Now, I am not trying to tempt you to be perfectionists about choosing all the right words so you don't look too shame-filled. Because that is a cul-de-sac with a swamp waiting at the end. But I think we have to contend with that, particularly in the Christian community, I think it's pretty darn close to being called a shame-based culture. It's pretty close. The problem is what Kaylin kind of hit on. We love to talk about grace, but we motivate by shame. So how do I resolve that? I mean, we don't. And usually what we end up saying internally, and I say we, you can just substitute me, it's like, I'll never be that good. I just won't. So, keep going. Whatever. I'll do the best I can. Which usually means more shame. And that's why people get caught in these shame cycles, is because shame is an extremely efficient way to change behavior. It's an extremely efficient way to do it. Temporarily. It does it for a while. You watch somebody who's gotten caught, in pornography, or gotten caught in an affair, or gotten caught in whatever kind of thing that is considered, relationship damaging, or whatever you want to say. And for a period of time, they really walk the straight and narrow until something else happens. And the problem is how do they respond when they fail? And guess what it is? Shame. So then they drop into a hole again, feel bad enough for a long enough period of time, shake it off, try again, go back to shame, rinse, dry, repeat. And that's really our lives a lot of times in terms of changing behavior. Social media obviously doesn't help. Watch some of the Twitter debates going on in a lot of cases. The thing I add here is the role of biblical standards. There's nothing you got to understand, okay? Because a lot of people, if they were to be in here, a lot of older people were in here and hearing me talk, they would say, you're giving these students a license to sin. Somebody doesn't know about grace. And I'll just quote my former best friend, because he got accused of the same thing. You're giving people a license to sin. And his response was, I thought I was giving them a motivation not to. See, there's a lot of our relationships that are shame-based too. Now, they're less so oftentimes when we begin to induce grace within it. Because I don't respond to my wife because I feel bad or because I'm being bad or anything like that. I'm doing it because I want her to experience what I sometimes I may not even feel. And see, that's our problem too, right? We're really gracious with everybody else. But the minute I let her down or disappoint her, shame's waiting at the door. And I've seen it, the longer I've been studying this and thinking about it and writing about it, the more I've begun to realize this is embedded. This is a mole beyond all moles. It's a spy within my system that knows exactly where. And Satan is no dummy. All he has to do is build on what we do with shame and turn the volume up. You don't even have to lift a finger because it works all on its own. Biblical standards are there to help us strive, but what motivates us to get there should be grace, not shame. That's where the Pharisees went off the rails. And that's exactly why Jesus went after them the way he did. I mean, look at any of the examples of where he did any healing on the Sabbath. And they went so far off the rail. I can't help but look at that situation in my head and see Jesus going, are you guys serious? You would have me not heal somebody's hand just because it's a Sabbath? I'm missing something. Of course, he wouldn't say that, but... So, the response... How are we doing on time? The response to scarcity, at least from Brene Brown, and I will certainly support that and further it, is what she calls wholeheartedness. 2 weeks from now, we will dive in deeply into a corollary or a parallel wording of this that I use, and that is called the stained glass self. But the core of wholeheartedness is vulnerability and acceptance. Scarcity tempts us into defining ourselves in terms of diminishing sources. I would even say changing sources. It's fascinating to read. I did a real brief kind of word study in Scripture about wholehearted or wholeheartedly or integrity of the heart or things like that. That was one descriptor of David, was that he was wholehearted, or he was known for living out of the integrity of his heart. But notice where the integrity starts. It starts at the heart. It doesn't start on behavior. Now, it shows itself out in behavior. But we've bought into the notion that acceptance is dependent only on what others say about us. If you find somebody who is free enough to accept themselves as they are, he or she is, you probably will find somebody who's free. Alarmingly free. At least in the context in which we operate. And it's important to keep in mind, because the one thing Brown doesn't bring to the picture is, I know that she's a person of faith, but she has a different audience than I have. But my wife has been, in the other room as I'm reading some of these books, and I'm always talking out loud at the author and writing things and whatever. And I keep saying over and over again, why doesn't she talk about grace? Because it is the glue that allows us to be wholehearted. It's the stuff that makes us free. It's the dirty little celestial secret that God had in his mind. Let me set them free. Let me pay all that they owe me, so that they truly can make a free choice for me. And then once they've done that, now they can start choosing each other. Jesus with skin on type stuff. Okay, I'll stop. Any questions? Any reactions or anything? I gotta stop doing that. You never have anything anyway. Bye.